Infinity Bros podcast, the only podcast that's perfectly balanced as all things should be. My name is Isaac Edlin. I am one of your hosts tonight, and with me I have my good friend Zane Ellis. How you doing, Zane?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy to be here. Happy to be talking some Ahsoka with you. I can't wait.
Let's go. Yep. Big time Ahsoka episode that we will be discussing later. And we missed last week, so we're actually going to be discussing episode 3 and 4 of Ahsoka. Zane and I, big Ahsoka fans. You can check out our episode 1 and 2 review on episode 177 of the Infinity Bros podcast, which you can find at theinfinitybros.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Good stuff. We had a good discussion last week about Ahsoka and where it's headed. And I'm looking forward to discussing more with you, Zane.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know it was kind of tough because it's like, oh man, we missed last week and we're going to have to do a double dip again. But it was just like, there's so much to talk about. Yeah. And with both of us who just know, hey, we geek out about this. And I mean, even after watching this most recent episode, I think both of us, every time we watch an episode, we start texting each other.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Right. But the most recent one especially, that was the one that we were both just like, oh my.
Yeah, that was the one that I had to, every once in a while, there's just an episode that I will get done watching at 2 or 3 a.m. and I have to text Zane. I don't even care if he's working or sleeping. I don't care. I got to text him. Because I know you're the one that gets to things quickly, Star Wars wise anyways. Mark, I know, gets there usually the week of. I don't think Jarrett's been able, this whole year, I don't think he's really been able to keep up on everything.
Right.
Because he's been super busy. But you are the one that I'm I know Zane has either already consumed this or he is going to in the next day, basically.
Right.
So
that's been the only bummer. Can understand why they did it, but usually whenever they have new show on Disney, it's usually that morning, so then I can come home right away in the morning, right after work, and usually watch it right away. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Ahsoka, they've been doing it Tuesday nights. Well, it's it drops when I'm at work, so it's still you usually watch it right away now, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to get home and watch it because it's been up there longer.
I've been able to most nights. Well, it's only been 3 weeks now, and I think most of these 3 weeks I've been able to watch it Tuesday night. During the night at some point. So yeah, usually I've texted you and you're like, I can't wait to watch it.
I can't wait to get home.
Yeah, but this latest one especially. Before we get into all that, welcome new listeners. We are the Infinity Bros, group of 6 guys who have a rotating cast, and we talk pop culture, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, movies, film, video games. Make sure you check out the earlier part of this episode, our Patreon exclusive portion, where we review Twisted Metal. Zane and I, both big fans. Twisted Metal. It was really fun. And we also talk about Starfield a little bit. Zane's been dipping his toes into that since it dropped and having fun so far, right, Zane?
Yeah, it's been fun. I've liked what they've put into it so far, and yeah, I haven't put a ton of time into it yet, but looking forward to playing more.
Getting lost in space.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
In lots of space.
Yes.
Lots of space to get lost in Starfield. Anyways, if you want to check that out, make sure you check out our Patreon. You can get hooked up with Patreon exclusive episodes and portions of episodes with unedited Patreon exclusive podcast episodes. So a lot of good stuff there, but you can also check us out at theinfinitybros.com. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube. Infinity Bro Robbie's doing some really awesome stuff on TikTok, pushing that, and he's been talking about One Piece because the live action One Piece came out recently, I think in the last week or two, and finished that, and now he's starting the anime because he made a TikTok about it, and basically everybody was like, you need to watch the anime. So Robbie has embarked his journey on a anime that is over 1,000 episodes long. Right. Have you watched One Piece at all, Zane?
I have. I watched the first season or two, but I think it kind of got to the point I was just like, my goodness, there are so many episodes, and then I just got distracted on other stuff, but then here I am also doing another rewatch of Dragon Ball Z, so I'm I have the time for it. I guess I'm just kind of being lazy. I should.
But I mean, you look at that and it's intimidating.
Yeah.
1,000+ episodes that you got to get through. And so many people have been commenting on Robbie's TikToks. He's kind of given like episodely, not every episode, but every once in a while he gives an update on where he's at and what his thoughts are on One Piece. And people are saying like it's not about getting through 1,000 episodes, it's about the journey. Because I mean, it's 1,000+ episode. You kind of have to think that way if that's the way you're doing it. So again, I have not watched the live action One Piece that is on Netflix right now, but he liked that enough to be like, yeah, let's do this. Let's watch this gigantic anime.
Let's start this adventure.
So good stuff happening over on TikTok from Infinity Bro Robbie. But we are here to review episodes 3 and 4 of Ahsoka. Before we get going here, I do want to let you new listeners know that we have a special way of rating things on the Infinity Bro podcast. So let's play that bumper.
Here on the Infinity Bros podcast, everything is ranked from a 0 to 6 point scale. 0 meaning horrible and 6 meaning absolutely excellent. If all of the Infinity Bros rank something a 6, it gets an Infinity Step.
So now that you know that, you kind of know a little bit about us, make sure you can check out our social media and contact us infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com to let us know about what you think of Ahsoka, what you think about Twisted Metal, Starfield, or One Piece. You know, any of those things, we'd be happy to hear from you on socials or by email. But we are going to be reviewing Ahsoka episodes 3 and 4. So we're going to be spoiling the whole season of Ahsoka at this point, especially episodes 3 and 4. So if you haven't watched those, make sure you hit pause right now, go watch those and come back here. But this is your official spoiler warning.
This is...
Prepare yourself.
An Infinity Bros.
Prepare yourself.
Spoiler. Warning.
All right, we got that out of the way. Here we go, Zane. We're diving in. Ahsoka miniseries on Disney Plus. 8 episodes. We are currently on 3 and 4 right now. Dropping, like we mentioned previously, Tuesday evenings on Disney Plus. And so far, it's been incredible. People, including Dave Filoni, I believe we mentioned on our previous episode, have been referring to Ahsoka as basically Rebels Season 5. This journey continues through episodes 3 and 4. We'll talk about episode 3 a little bit. Episode 4 is the big one that we're definitely going to get into, though. So we'll talk about episode 3 first, because obviously, comes before 4. So episode 3, we kind of get into Ahsoka and Sabine are tracking down Baylan Skoll and Shin, his apprentice, and they track him down to this system. They show up and they have the ring ship that Morgan Elsbeth has constructed, this gigantic ring ship. They show up and they see it and they're like, holy crap. As all of us should be, this gigantic ship that is capable of multi-galaxy hyperspace travel.
Right.
Which is not common. This is something new that we're hearing about, I feel like, in this season. Because, like, they talk about, all iterations of Star Wars, they talk about the galaxy all the time, right? Spanning the galaxy, planets that were all over the place. You don't really hear anything about other galaxies. So this is kind of a new thing that we're hearing about in Star Wars. So I think that's kind of cool. It totally makes sense because I rewatched Rebels, the last 3 episodes last night, just because, we'll get into it, but the world between worlds that we see in episode 4 is Rebels thing, starts there. And I was like, I got to refresh my memory on how this all works. So watch those episodes. Man, they do just a phenomenal. We were talking about this a little bit pre-Patreon even. Rebels is such a good show. If you have not watched Rebels, you need to go watch that. It might be a little too late at this point to finish Rebels before Ahsoka gets done, but you need to watch Rebels. It is top tier Star Wars content. It's so stinking good. So yeah, again, Rebels rewatch. At the end of Rebels, if you don't want to be spoiled on Rebels, you probably shouldn't be watching Ahsoka. But I will give you a minor Rebels spoiler. This is what happens at the end of Rebels. Ezra basically gets on Thrawn's ship. He calls the Purgle to Thrawn's ship, and the Purgle, who are capable of apparently multi-galaxy hyperspace travel, which is not really explained in Rebels either, but it happens. They whisk both Ezra and Thrawn out into hyperspace. And then we find out in Ahsoka that this is in a different galaxy. Like, you can't get there in a normal ship. Like, you need a big old giant hyperspace engine. I don't know how they call it.
Well,
I'm not an engine.
Well, it's multiple, because even in that ring, didn't they say that ring has like six hyperspace engines or something?
Yeah, there's multiple. So like, you need a very powerful ship to traverse galaxies, which I think is good and makes sense, because like otherwise you could just be galaxy hopping and doing whatever you want. So I think that was kind of a cool aspect that they added. Yeah, so the Purrgil whisk Ezra and Thrawn onto this other galaxy. And obviously Morgan Elsbeth is trying to get Thrawn back. So here we come upon them, and they've got this giant ring ship that Morgan Elsbeth has created. And obviously it's a little bit more for them to handle. So that was pretty crazy to see the scale of the ship compared to, like Ahsoka's ship, or later in episode 4, Hera's ship, and the X-Wings that come by. So they get basically shot down and land on the planet that they're nearby, that they're kind of using as a base to set up all this stuff. The one thing that I thought was cool in episode 3 was we got live action, big close-ups of Purrgil.
Yep.
That was really cool. Like they've done a fantastic job with space battles. I feel like Mandalorian had some phenomenal dogfighting. Just really, really, really great filmmaking with space battles in Star Wars over the past, Disney Plus shows that we've gotten. So great space battle. And then all of a sudden they're getting close to the surface of the planet, and boom, like a herd of Purrgil, or however you herd, whatever word that they use for a lot of Purrgil. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, we'll go with herd. That
sounds good.
That makes sense.
I suppose, I wonder, I would have to look that up. I wonder what they call a bunch of whales. There's probably a name for a pack of whales. A pod of Purrgil. Okay, that actually sounds pretty good. We'll go with a pod.
Sounds pod of Purrgil.
A pod of Purrgil.
Plus, it's fun to say, a pod of Purrgil.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we got a pod of Purrgil, and they're like flying in between the Purrgil tentacles and stuff. Like, oh, it's so cool. Like for the Rebel fan in me, it was just like, this is it. This is Star Wars. How many times have we said that during this season of Ahsoka? This is Star Wars.
Now this is Rebels.
It's Rebels. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was so cool. I do want to actually point out though, episode 3 is, there is a little bit of action in it, but it's a building episode. So there's not a whole lot that really happens in that episode. But we do, obviously, it advances the story. We get them down on the planet's surface. And then episode 4 is really where the crazy stuff starts.
The best part of episode 3 is probably that last 10 minutes. But yeah, it does a lot of building. But just the whole end of just everything after their ship gets stuck before they get down to the planet. That whole sequence of running from the Purrgil, and then Ahsoka just being like, hey, watch this.
Yeah.
And then just goes out, and you keep fix this ship.
Yeah. And
then just goes out, and you're just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna defend the ship in my Saiyan combat armor.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was a part that we have to talk about, because okay, for all of the Jedi in space that we've gotten, and I feel like almost 100% of it has been animation. Like Clone Wars, I feel like is the most Jedi in space that we've gotten. Seeing it in live action was just, it was so cool. I was geeking out seeing her
same.
in her, and one part that I was a little thought was funny was that she's got her own spacesuit that is literally fit to her head and everything. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. I like it.
Right.
But yeah, she's just
custom
out there. I don't know how space really works in Star Wars. I would assume that it's similar to space here, but it seems like the ship's got some gravity, because she's stepping on it, walking on it. She doesn't have any tethers on the ship. or nothing. But she's just flipping all, and part of it could be just like her force, like keeping her on the ship. But man, it was so cool to see her defending the ship in space with her lightsabers and stuff. Oh my gosh. That was just classic Star Wars, man.
Oh yeah, like even when after watching that scene, like that's all I could think too, which is like, this is classic. Like this is what the people that haven't watched the animated stuff, like this is the stuff you're missing out on.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it's a whole different medium with it animated, but like this is what I think of so much. Like this is Star Wars. This is something that's just, hey, we're just going to be a little nutty about this, and it's going to be that kind of makes sense, but it just looks too cool that you're not going to think about how it actually works. You're like, it's just cool and it's fun to watch, and like. It was the epitome of that too. I was just like, not only is this Star Wars, but it's just like, it's kept with the Rebels feel. Like this is 100%. And now granted, it didn't happen in Rebels, but like they had a scene of exactly like that in Clone Wars, when it was, except it was Anakin and Ahsoka.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's just like to see it on the screen. You're just like, they're nailing this. Like this is that Star Wars feel.
And like, okay, so going back to what you just said here, in Clone Wars, there's multiple moments where they have like Jedi in space and stuff like that. I recently just started rewatching Clone Wars when I was folding laundry and stuff like that. One of the first episodes is Ahsoka and Anakin going to rescue Plo Koon, or Plo Koon.
Yep.
And he does that because they're basically floating dead in space, and there's General Grievous's like warship is nearby, so they're like trying not to get found and trying to escape at the same time, but their ship is damaged or whatever, so they can't escape. But Plo Koon goes out there and he does work in space, and it's awesome to see. It's so cool. Even for all of the like sketchy animation and stuff in that first season, like it's pretty crude. You know, it gets much better as Clone Wars goes on, but that first couple seasons is it's weird to go back and watch that stuff.
Well, like that, even just that scene, like just taking that and running with it. Like that was the one thing I can remember, that scene being so impactful. That was one of those big moments that really draw you into Clone Wars. Because it's not even just like the crazy, oh my God, they're out in space, but even just that whole thing that they're dead in space and like Plo Koon's floating with the rest of those like troopers, and then they're basically just get to that point, they're like, hey, you can like save yourself, don't worry about us, like we're clones, we're expendable. And Plo Koon just looks at him, he's just like, not to me. And it's just like, that is so freaking cool. You're like, it's just a general Jedi right there. You're just like, no, you're not worthless to me. And it's just like, there's so many people that are just like, oh, this is just an animated. Then you watch scenes like that, and you're just like, this transcends animation. Like that is just fantastic.
And they're so creative with that, and it's crazy because it's like one of the first episodes of the Clone Wars, but they're so creative with how Plo Koon is fighting in space too. Like he's using the Force to like pull the clone troopers to places in space so they can attack the the droids and stuff. It's like, wow, this is legit. Like this is Star Wars. But another note I want to mention was actually very, very interesting. In that same episode, I think, Ahsoka is detected by General Grievous because they forget to turn off a medical droid when they turn off all their systems. And in this episode, she makes a point to turn off Huyang when they turn off all of their systems. I just thought that was like a cool, she learned from her mistakes. That was a really cool like moment, that it's just one of those subtle callbacks that you wouldn't have even noticed if you hadn't watched, or I didn't even notice it initially when I watched it. And then I was just like reading some, stuff and just going through the Clone Wars stuff. And I was like, that's so cool. Like Filoni, dude's got a vision, man, and I love it. It's it's awesome.
Just the amount of effort he makes to like tie previous stuff in, even on just the little details. Some of that, the addition of some of that it's a lot of fun to see.
Last thing I want to mention about part 3 is we get a little bit of a showdown with Hera and some of the leaders of the New Republic, including Mon Mothma, and we also see. I think at the end of episode 2, we see Jason Syndulla. And then we see him a little bit in episode 3 here too. But that was just like a little hey, you Rebels fans, here's here's a
Right,
little
right.
cool thing. Here you go.
Right.
Here's Jason Segel. But yeah, we see her basically facing off with the leaders of the New Republic, and she's, man, just again, the politics of Star Wars. The fact that they can make politics interesting in Star Wars is, I think, a feat in itself, because you go back to the prequels. I mean, episode 1, 2, and 3 a little bit, but 1 and 2 mostly. Heavy politics in those first 2 movies. To be honest, especially Attack of the Clones, probably one of my least favorite Star Wars movies because of that, because it is a very heavy politics, a lot of dialogue, slow moving. But the fact that they can wrap all that together in such a great way, I love that they brought the New Republic back, and the New Republic is just doing this all over again. Like, they're just getting into the politics, like, I don't know if we can help this planet because because of this reason and this reason. This was just like, this is just happening all over again. And Hera is having none of it. She's like, all right, well, screw you guys. I'm going to leave and go help my friend.
Right. Exactly. Like, yeah. Well, I love that. That's even the line when Jason and they're getting in the ship and leaving, and he's just like, but shouldn't you have to listen? And she just looks at him and she's like, when you're a general, you can do whatever you want. It's just like, yes.
Yep.
It's like that. That is
this episode too, with that line and with how she was basically acting with the New Republic leaders. This was Hera, because like, I think there's been a lot of people like, how is the translation from animated to live action? And I think you and I even too may have some issues with like Sabine as far as how she's depicted in Rebels and in this show, but that was Hera. Like, that was so exactly how she would have done it in Rebels. Loved it. 100% all in on Hera Syndulla in this show. Fantastic. I think that was pretty much most of the big hitters in episode 3 that I wanted to mention. You got anything else that you want to talk about in that one?
No, that was pretty much it. Because yeah, like you said, it's more of that background, setting up that dialogue stuff, some of the politics of it, and then obviously the space fight's really cool.
Yeah,
but like it's really just kind of that little bit in the beginning of the episode and then the end of that episode. The middle, it's just kind of the plot device to get between the two. Like, it's not a ton of noteworthy stuff happens. I feel like
setting all up for episode 4, which has been the best episode in the season so far. I think that you would also agree. First of all, before we get into episode 4, what would you rate episode 3 skills?
I'm gonna give 3 a 5, just because I still like that politics stuff. Like, I still like.
Come on, we don't rate things out of 5 on the Infinite Bros podcast. Come on.
Okay, a 5.2.
Okay. Oh, okay. I thought you said 3 out of 5. You said a 5. Okay.
No, a 5. Sorry.
I thought you were saying you were rating it 3 out of 5, and I was like, Zane, come on.
No,
the Infinity Bros podcast, we rate things out of 6 here. Good. I'm glad. You scared me a little bit, but we're good. We're all good. Okay, no, I think I'd give it that too. I would give it a 5 out of 6 as well. It's still entertaining.
It's entertaining. It drags a little bit, but like, I still love a good space fight. Like, it's always super entertaining. The Purgle.
Great.
Like, I think what helps it with the 5 or so much more is that was definitely more of an episode of like, if you liked and watched Rebels, like, you're gonna get way more from that episode than
I think so too. Yeah, absolutely. Diving into part 4, I think this is also, I mean, a little bit of background. I think this is one of the highest rated episodes of Disney Star Wars TV ever. It's on IMDb a 9 out of 10. I'm not sure what it is on Rotten Tomatoes, but I can't imagine it's any less than like 95%.
Right.
It's phenomenal. It's a great episode. If you haven't watched it yet, well, first of all, what are you doing? Listen to this, but like, you need to go watch this, because some jaw-dropping moments in this. So let's get into it. We start there on the forest floor, basically, of the planet that they landed on, and they defend their ship, first of all, from Baylan Skoll and Shin. They kind of send their goons out to track them down. Easy enough time with those guys, right? Nothing like too significant. But then Shin and Merrick show up. That's where the episode really gets going, because we get some sweet lightsaber fighting. Merrick, okay, I don't know if you thought this, Zane, but I thought we were getting it this episode. Merrick's got the Inquisitor lightsaber and starts spinning the lightsaber, and I could have swore Merrick was going to take off and start flying with that. I was like, yes, we're getting it in live action. Merrick's going to fly. It's going to be awesome. But Merrick didn't do that.
No.
Some big questions here. So Ahsoka defeats Merrick. Not really that big a deal. I mean, Ahsoka's super experienced, so I don't think that's so far-fetched. But she takes out Merrick, slices them across the chest, and then boom, cloud of smoke. I was like, wait a minute, what's happening now? What did you think of that when that happened?
That was it's weird because there's so many theories of oh my goodness, who's Merrick going to be? Who's this? Of all the stuff that was in your head of oh, it could be this, could be this. That was the one I did not expect at all.
Right. Yeah.
And all of a sudden you see that and you're like, oh, wait a second. I didn't even hear a theory about, any of this. It was all, oh, it could be this person. It could be this.
Right.
And then you see that and you get that brief moment of you're just like, wait a second. Everyone was completely wrong on this. And then you take that moment of realize, oh, well, this is Dathomir. This is Night Sister magic.
Yeah.
You're like, is this just anyone of a body that was just being raised? Is it going to be... And then, of course, Ryan starts going further from there. Or is it going to be impactful of is this someone's body that is impactful in the series that someone brought back to life with Night Sister magic?
Right.
But yeah, in that first moment, it takes a second. You're just like, oh,
yeah, right.
It was kind of a wild.
I was reeling because I was like, what just happened? Because of what you said, everybody has been projecting all these theories oh, it's this person, it's this person, it's Ezra Bridger, it's Cal Kestis, we're even on the last episode of our podcast, we're speculating who the heck could this be, and then boom, cloud of smoke, and we're all like, oh my gosh, it didn't matter. None of that mattered. Like you said, maybe there is a chance that it could come into play at some point here. Maybe it's somebody that they raised. Maybe it's just a complete, not figment of their imagination, but my thought was going back to, I believe it's episode 8, The Last Jedi, where Luke is fighting Kylo Ren, and turns out it's just a force projection, basically. So that part of me was oh, is this just a projection of Night Sister magic? Is this nothing? But there was physical, she actually slashed Merrick, and then it exploded. There was some physical being there. But a little bit of context for those of you who have not watched Clone Wars. This is going back to Dathomir, Night Sisters, Darth Maul storyline. Night Sister magic still pretty unexplainable in general Star Wars lore. A lot of crazy stuff can happen with Night Sister magic that we don't know about. So this is just another one of those things that we're like, oh, okay, here we go. My question is this Morgan Elsbeth controlling Merrick? Is it something that, like you said, that she raised somebody and their own kind of being now? How does Merrick work? That's what I want to know. And I think we'll find out a little bit more about, how that all is going to go down in the coming episodes, but really fascinating that nobody saw coming, I feel like.
Right. Well, not only that, but even watching, when Ahsoka, strikes it down and that smoke comes out, even it does that quick flash, even to show Hottie's face. And it's she didn't even expect that.
Right.
So it seems like there's more working on of all right, well, what's Merrick's story then? Because it just seemed like if even Hottie didn't even know that who he was, so then is there another secret that's being held from them?
This is where it gets really interesting, because Merrick has force abilities, because we saw in episode 2, I believe it was, when Ahsoka was fighting Merrick on Corellia, I think it was, Merrick force whisked their lightsaber back to themselves at the end of the fight. So like they have force abilities. So is this?
But is it force abilities, or were they using death mirroring
right?
magic?
Yeah, and obviously they wanted us to be in the dark to them being a Night Sister magic or whatever. So they were portraying it as force abilities at the time. Could it be Night Sister magic raising a Jedi that actually is using their own force abilities? I don't know, man. There's so many things that it could be at this point.
Right.
But it is hilarious to me that everybody was just going nuts about who this Merrick could be, and then all of a sudden just boom, gone.
Completely wrong.
Just everybody's wrong. I love that. Filoni's just sitting over there just chuckling like
right. The other thing I was going to mention about from that scene too, that I don't know if you picked up on this, but I'd have to rewatch the two scenes just on parallel to see how close they actually were. But this is what popped into my mind when watching that. So like obviously Merrick's there and he's like charging lightsaber, so it's spinning. How that scene is shot and how they're facing each other. My initial reaction after seeing that was he uses like the same move, or it's a very similar in the fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
the single strike when Obi-Wan kills Darth Maul.
Exactly.
Like I don't know if that's Filoni just being like homage to that, because it's like it almost looks like he used the same move, and like Ahsoka does the same thing Obi-Wan does.
Right.
And I was just like, well, that was really cool.
Yeah.
And then of course then that leaves me, it's just like, oh my goodness, is that going to be like the dead body of Darth Maul that's being
Oh
controlled?
my gosh, that would be
And I was
wild.
just like, well, right, that's what I was thinking too. But then at the same time, I was just like, the ending of Darth Maul's story at the hands of Obi-Wan in the desert is so
it's
good.
perfect.
I
Yeah.
feel like to bring Maul back from that would just like, granted, it's a Star Wars thing, but like I feel like that ending was so good, and Filoni did such a good job of ending that.
Yeah.
That like you don't need to bring Maul back
Right.
from that.
Yeah, I don't think you do. And honestly, if we ever see Maul in live action again, the only thing that I would want would be a shot for shot live action recreation of that Obi-Wan Darth Maul fight. Nothing different.
Yeah.
Exactly the same as the Rebels showdown. That's all I want from Darth Maul at this point. Like
That would be
he
epic.
had
Yeah.
an incredible arc in Clone Wars and in Rebels, and I think it's just perfect the way it is. Just leave it be. There has been some buzz about potentially doing a Solo sequel. Obviously, at the end of Solo, we get Darth Maul, a cameo of Darth Maul, and he from what I remember, he's still got the spider bottom in
the
that
lower
So it's
body.
it's like pretty early Darth Maul. So there's time to do some live action stuff if they really want to.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Honestly, Solo is good in and of itself. I don't think it really needs a sequel. I mean, hey, if they make one, I'm gonna watch it.
Right, I'm gonna watch it. Right.
But I don't think it really needs it. But yeah, that's the only thing I really would want from a live action, more of Darth Maul. So next thing I want to talk about here, Zane, is Sabine. There's been a decent amount of discussion about the differences between Sabine in Rebels and Sabine in Ahsoka. The main thing that I think people are picking up on is that she seems pretty inexperienced and kind of green in Ahsoka. Not just in lightsaber battles, which we would expect. That makes sense because she's not super highly trained in, lightsaber battles per se. But as a warrior, she is very capable. Going back to, again, my rewatch of the last 3 episodes, like she's a badass in Rebels. Like she can take care of herself just fine, even against higher threats like other Mandalorians, even like some Jedi and dark Jedi Sith type threats. Like she's capable of handling herself without the lightsaber stuff. So the fact that we see her struggling in this series is interesting to me. I think they may have set her back a little bit as far as just being a warrior. But at the same time, I think Natasha Liu Bordizzo, who plays Sabine Wren, I think she's doing a fantastic job portraying her. But it is just interesting how they portraying her skills, I guess, in this live action Ahsoka. I think so. This next part, we kind of have, Ahsoka break off and she's taken on Merrick and Sabine takes on Shin. Rematch. Cool. Love that. And the first part I think is really cool. Sabine comes out with her blasters and has Shin on the run. Like that part shows the warrior in her, I feel like,
Right.
because she's like, Shin obviously senses that she's a threat without her lightsaber, right? Like she's running, like she knows that she's legit.
Mhm.
But then all of a sudden, when it comes to time to take out the lightsaber, it's like, boom, she's like back to kind of like elementary, crude lightsaber fighting and stuff like that, which again, maybe expected with the lightsaber fighting, but not the other stuff. What have been your thoughts on Sabine so far? And does that bug you at all, or you've not really noticed that?
I mean, I've noticed a little bit, but I don't think it's been enough to be bothersome to me. Because, like, for me, I think what Sabine is representing more, especially in this show. Granted, it's named after Ahsoka, but like we've already seen so much from Ahsoka's past and everything else. We've seen Ahsoka have the hero struggle. I think Sabine in this show is where we're finally seeing like it's the hero struggle for Sabine in this one. Because I mean, Ezra's not here, even though we've seen it most of his story with Rebels. Hera's kind of off on her. Like Sabine's that present one that has to go through that struggle because just like everything that they've set up too, just like she was training under Ahsoka, and Ahsoka and her head are different. Just everything that's happened, and then I think it represents the hero struggle. It's just like who is she confident in herself? And like I get not being able to fight well with the lightsaber because just like I mean even like listen to the episodes before when Huang's like you'd be the worst candidate I've ever seen and like all this stuff and it's just like I think that's what ties into her story is it's her doubt in herself. I think she's competent as a warrior and as a Mandalorian, but I think there's that struggle and growth that she can be more. Like you even see that then later in the episode of not destroying that map because she wants to get back to like she wants Ezra back. I feel like that her character, like I said, the show's called Ahsoka, but I think we're going to get the most character development from Sabine throughout this whole show.
I think you're right on that because we mentioned it last episode too. We've gotten a ton of character growth with Ahsoka through Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Like that turned out to be her show. For all the things that people have been saying about Ahsoka, I think the fact that we're getting some of these other characters and like you said, their character growth, Sabine's character growth, I think that's phenomenal. And I think even going back to Rebels, Sabine, that's not new struggle for her. Like they went through another Mandalorian civil war in Rebels and people looked up to her as a leader against, kind of the Imperial side of the Mandalorians. And she didn't really want to be a leader and didn't want to be part of that. Like she just ended up kind of getting thrust into that position and she struggled with that big time. And, finally, when that civil war resolved, she did give up leadership and gave the Darksaber back to Bo-Katan. Here we go again. She's kind of trying to figure out where her place in the galaxy is. And I think you're right. I think we're going to see more of that this season than growth from Ahsoka because Ahsoka's pretty mature and pretty well set in her place in the world at this point, I think.
Right.
So, or the universe, I should say.
Right.
There's a lot of worlds in that universe.
Right.
But yeah, I feel like she's pretty set. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of carry the story along with the growth of other characters.
Yeah, I agree.
That was a cool part. We finally get, so Sabine, we get to the star map site and we get a showdown between Baylan and Ahsoka, which, man, this was intense. Great lightsaber fight. And we finally get to see Baylan in action because really he's just been standing around this whole show. Looking intimidating and stuff,
right.
But, oh, man, it was so cool to see him fighting in live action. Oh, so he's just like this big, powerful, intimidating presence. It was an incredible portrayal of that power and presence in the way that he fought with his lightsaber. Just powerful. I compared him to Dooku last episode, and Dooku was kind of like this sophisticated, like you got the sense that he was more on the duel, very formal dueling background. And Baylan you're not necessarily getting the dueling stuff, but he's still very poised and sophisticated in how he handles himself, like with the lightsaber. But
Right.
man, the moves that he was doing, you just thought like every move that he could knock Ahsoka on her butt,
Right.
because it was just powerful. I thought that was an awesome lightsaber fight. What did you think of that one, Zane?
Oh yeah, like that was another perfect example of like, this is Star Wars. It's another great example, and like I thought it was a very good balance for a lightsabers fight, because it was a combination. Like, I get there's different camps, and I know Robbie's in that camp too, of like this fighting style compared to like the old movies to the new, like
Right.
that fight kind of combined the two. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't
Yep.
all flash and, you know, spinning and all this crazy stuff, because at
Right.
the same time it didn't need to be. Like you've been explaining, Balin's this intimidating presence. Like, his strikes were purposeful and with
Yeah.
intent, and it's just like he doesn't need to be all kinds of spinning around and all these fancy flips, because
Right.
just like he's capable of what he's doing and he knows what he's doing. And it was like, it was very cool to see how that fight played out, because
Right.
I think Ahsoka's way more of the flashy. Obviously he has two lightsabers and stuff, but like just how that fight pans out like that. These are the lightsaber fights that are really fun to watch. Like, again, like I said, this is
Yeah.
Star Wars. Like,
Yeah. And it was cool to see how Ahsoka responded to him in this episode, and earlier in this episode too. She's only using one of her lightsabers.
mhm.
And it's cool to, you know, you mentioned she is kind of like the more flat, especially if you watch Clone Wars. She's all spinning around and like jumping around, and the two lightsabers, like, you know, really cool, like lightsaber fighting style. She definitely seems like she's more purposeful, more defensive in the series, you know, not just this fight. And she shows that in this fight. Like, she takes out the one lightsaber, and she's, like you said, he's doing like every move that he makes is with intent, with purpose. And she kind of is almost echoing that, like in response. Like, every move that she's making is very thought out, maybe purposeful. And it's a cool to see it. Like you said, it's a good balance between like emotion and lightsaber fighting.
Mhm.
You know, I think throughout all the lightsaber fights in Star Wars, you get a good balance of both. You know, in the prequels, we get a lot of really flashy lightsaber battles. And then, you know, in the original, it's more of the emotion. Like, it's
Yeah.
not like necessarily super flashy, but like you can just, it's a tense moment.
It's
And
a
sure,
tent,
there's-
right?
Right. There's definitely a balance of both in most lightsaber fights, but I think they did a really good job of balancing both of those in this one for sure. And I love Baylan, dude. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
he's an amazing villain.
Or hey, you know, look at the other side. You know what we learned from Jedi Survivor.
Yeah.
Single blade is the most balanced fighting style. So,
Yeah,
you know, maybe Ahsoka
right.
just knows that we got to go
Maybe she
single
does,
blade.
yeah, exactly.
You know?
And again, even though she is seeking out Baylan, in this situation, it very quickly turns to Baylan is the aggressor, and
Yep.
Ahsoka is defending herself,
Yep.
which, I mean, just shows you just, again, the power, how powerful he is. Ray Stevenson, man, he does such a good job as Baylan
Phenomenal
Skoll in this.
actor. Yep.
It is just tragic that we're not going to be able to see him
Yeah.
in this role or any role. Like, I feel bad even saying that. He's just does an incredible job in this, and I'm not sad about only him not being in Star Wars. It's just sad that we're not going to see him again in
Right.
anything. 'Cause,
Anything.
yeah,
Right.
he does such an incredible job in this role. Yeah, Ray Stevenson, rest in peace, man, because you did best job you could have as Baylan Skoll. And then Shin comes in. Oh man, so much good stuff in this. We get Shin. This is just the classic. Again, this is one of those moments. This is Star Wars.
Right. Right.
Shin comes in, and she's the classic dark apprentice, right? Like, she comes in, and they finally defeat Ahsoka. They defeat Sabine. Sabine's like on the ground, surrendered, and Shin is like force choking her.
Right.
And Baylan's like, hey, knock it off.
Right.
But you know that this is going to come down to a clash between Baylan and Shin, because
Yeah.
Baylan is very experienced. He's set. He's not a Sith. Like, he's He's a guy who knows where he's at in the galaxy. Shin, on the other hand, she is a wild card. And I feel like she could go very dark, very fast. I think Baylan's going to have a problem with that later on in the season.
Like, it was something I saw some people talking about even early on, and now it's just more resonant. And like, I forgot, didn't really mention this like in the first part of the episode, but like now it's more prevalent. And then even just from playing God of War Ragnarok, I was like, oh, wait a second. Yeah. So obviously it's Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. Skoll and Hati are the name of the two wolves in Norse mythology that chase the sun and the moon respectively. Hati in Norwegian, or would be Norwegian,
Norse,
or Norse, Hati means hate. Skoll means deception.
Wow.
And so it's just very fascinating when you look in those names, and basically that's what the story is, that each wolf, one is chasing the sun through the sky, one is chasing the moon, and they represent like light and dark, good and evil, like, kind of like the aspect of like yin yang. Like, you look up drawings of Hati and Skoll in any like Norse mythology, and that's what they look like. It's the working together, that they are representatives of life and death, light and dark. And I just think that was really fascinating. It's like, there's no way that's just, oh, these are cool names. Like, I think that was such an intentional thing.
Didn't think we were going to get a Norse mythology lesson from Zane on the Infinity Bros podcast, but here you are.
But and even still, like, that's such a Filoni thing to be like, hey, we're going to reference. Now, granted, there's also a whole deep cut with Merrick, because like Merrick was a knight in, I don't know if you heard this at all too, but so Merrick was a knight in like King Arthur's table.
Oh, okay.
And Morgan was also, Morgan Le Fay, who is the sorceress, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So there's a story that, I don't know if the names are all interchangeable and different stuff, but there's an King Arthurian legend of Merrick who gets turned into a werewolf. And then he has to like prove his innocence to get turned back. Like, it's really interesting how like these names, I don't think are just like, oh, these are cool names. Like, you look at it and you're like, this has to be like a deeper meaning to some of the stuff. And knowing Filoni, like, he's the type of guy that's like, hey, we're gonna get creative with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So those are just some of the stuff. It's like, oh, this is really interesting.
There's
I wonder
so
how
much in this episode. So much stuff to go over, and it's amazing. I love it.
Right.
Anyways, we get Sabine basically giving the star map to Baylan, who completes the download of the star map to to Morgan Elsbeth, and then destroys it in the coolest way possible.
Yes,
that was like the coolest shot.
That was so legit. I was like, oh dang, gosh. Okay.
Whips out his orange lightsaber and just
oh legit.
Gosh.
Like,
that was so cool. Baylan's going to become like one of my favorite like antagonists in Star Wars by the end of this. It's so cool. So he destroys it. Then they take Sabine up to their big ring ship. They're getting ready to go. And here comes Hera to the rescue. Couple things about Hera. Number one, interesting that she's bringing Jason with her to, she's going to fight, right? Like,
right.
Like, she knows she's going to fight.
Well, hypothetically, because when they left, they didn't entirely know what they were waiting for.
True. That's true.
And so, but like,
still, I was just like,
gonna go,
man, you're bringing this child to this, like, potentially dangerous conflict? Like, I don't know about that. Anyways, or get there, and this was the coolest moment. There's so many cool moments in this episode, so I can't say it's the coolest moment in this episode, but I loved how they get there, boom, they see the big ring ship, and holy crap, Morgan Elsbeth's just like, go to hyperspace, screw them.
Right.
But while I was watching that, I think it's Rise of Skywalker vibes, or is it Rise of Skywalker or The Last Jedi, where the purple hair chick turns the ship around and goes into hyperspace and knocks out the giant cruiser or whatever. I was like, oh man, are they going to get obliterated by this ring ship and then a ring ship? So I was like, okay, yeah, they'll probably go in the middle, like,
right.
But still, how is this like going into hyperspace around them? Like, I was like, they could still get obliterated if the hyperspace travel is so much tear on their ship or whatever, right? Like, they could still get destroyed. So I was like, wow, what's going to happen here? You go into hyperspace, boom, knocks him back a little bit, but it's just like, okay, that was a cool
That was a
bad
cool
guy moment.
shot. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool bad guy moment by Morgan Elsbeth there. You know, to this point, like she's like your typical bad guy, like I'm gonna do all the bad
Right.
things. You know, like, you just expect stuff like that.
Right.
That was the moment that I was like, okay,
That
that
was
was cool.
kind of cool. Yeah.
That was kind of cool. Yep. They're sitting there floating in space. We get the giant, most important moment in live action Disney Star Wars to date at the end of this episode.
Yes.
Ahsoka, who was knocked off of the ledge by Baylan Skoll, presumed dead by Skoll and Hadi and Sabine, wakes up in the world between worlds, which, you know, after Rebels, you kind of assumed that that might have a part to play in Star Wars at some point.
Right.
But, you know, it's just one of those things like, is it, you know, you could just leave it in animation, you know, and just like, it's one of those weird Star Wars things. And it's really cool, but it's like so mystical and we know nothing about it, even from the episode, almost 3-4 episode arc that we get in Rebels about it. Still, we just don't know anything about it.
Right.
And so I did not expect them to go to it this early. It was just like, what?
Yep.
She wakes up in the world between worlds. For you non-Rebels Star Wars fans, is basically like a place in between like space and time. Like it's, you can see moments in time, but it's not necessarily, and there's portals to those moments in time, but you can't really like go and come and go as you please. Like it's not really a time travel thing. Again, lots of questions about it. Filoni goes a little bit in detail in an interview and basically says it's not meant to be like a time travel thing. You can see these moments in time, which we go back to Ezra Bridger in Rebels. He makes it into the world between worlds, is able to pull Ahsoka out of a moment in time into the world between worlds. So Ahsoka's been there before. That's what's really interesting to me, is that like she knows what this is. She wakes up and she's not really, she's surprised that she's there, but she's not mind blown.
Right.
Like
she's been there before. Right.
She's been there before. But, you know, there's only certain portals that you can come in and go out of, as evidenced by that episode. So I'm really interested to find out what happened to get Ahsoka to this place. She turns around. Well, first of all, she hears "Hello, Snips," which that was another. Is just like
right.
She wakes, just like bang, bang, bang. She wakes up in worlds between worlds. Crazy, mind blowing. We hear "Hello, Snips," which is Anakin's voice. Boom, another mind blowing moment. We turn around, we see us Anakin in like Revenge of the Sith, like timeline, right?
Yeah.
They de-age Hayden Christensen, which is another weird, interesting filmmaking decision. They did not de-age him for Obi-Wan, where he's clearly a Padawan and looks older than he probably should, but they de-aged him for this a little bit. Not really sure what that's about.
My take on that was I felt like they did that because like they were trying to still bit of a capture of like from Clone Wars, because like this whole series they're pulling stuff from the animated into the real and like doing that, and like I feel like that's what gave way more of that feeling that like this is letting you know like this is Clone Wars Anakin.
I think you're definitely right on that. I think they definitely tried to, honestly, in a lot of stuff that Hayden Christensen has been, you know, kind of getting a revitalization in Star Wars fandom, which is awesome. Like I love seeing that, but he, in some of the stuff he has been doing, has been trying to, and this, you know, maybe this is, I don't know, I don't think he's said anything about this in interviews or anything, but it definitely seems like he's trying to sound like Matt Lanter, the voice actor for Clone Wars, who plays Anakin. So very interesting that you mentioned that. I think that's a really, really good point, that they're trying to say, hey, this is Clone Wars Anakin, which obviously that's where we know Ahsoka from. So,
well, it's not only that, but part of what gives the reason that too of it being Clone Wars Anakin is like this is when Anakin's still good. Like this is before Anakin has gone to the dark side, and it's like if there's ever an Anakin that's going to help Ahsoka in this time of need, it would be that Anakin.
Yep.
And that's why,
true.
and I know that's something I texted you too, of like, that was what my theory was of how she got there, is that Anakin pulled her in.
Yeah.
And I think, because I know, like, now granted, if you haven't seen like Clone Wars, Rebels, you don't pick up on this, but like something Ahsoka carries as a big regret. She regrets walking away from Anakin, so it's, in part, she feels guilty. That's why Anakin went to the dark side, because she wasn't there to balance him and save him. And that also kind of ties into everything with Sabine, because Ahsoka walks away from stuff, all that. And that's why my thought was that was Anakin pulling her in, because it was just like, this is kind of the flip on that. This is Anakin saving Ahsoka to kind of make up for, Ahsoka's biggest regret is not saving Anakin. Well, now here's Anakin saving her and being like, I think that's how it's going to tie in. And I'm super excited to see, because it's just like, even just in that moment, you're just like, you had that flashback of Clone Wars of Ahsoka being the Padawan and, all the adventures they went, and just being able to like have that look back of like, this is when Anakin was still a good. Like, this was before he went evil. And you're just like, this is cool. Like, I'm so excited to see what episode 5 is going to give us, because I feel like episode 5 is going to be the like mind-bending episode. Because like,
and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It is I think you're right on that. Episode 5 is going to be wild, even from the point of like, I just don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea where they're going with this. But the one thing I wanted to go back to was the big moments happening here. We get Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds, then hello Snips, then she turns around, Anakin's there. Almost immediately after she sees Anakin, it cuts to black, and we get the Vader score. The Vader score, which this is what makes me like wonder what the heck's going on. Because if what is happening is what you're saying, is that this is Clone Wars Anakin, why are we getting the Vader theme? That made me a little wary of this Anakin. I don't know what is going on with the World Between Worlds. Part of me thinks that this Anakin is not real, that it's either a forced projection of somebody trying to lead Ahsoka in a certain way or something like that. I don't know what's going on, man. If it is Clone Wars Anakin, I'm pumped for that. Something about it just feels off to me, though. And I'm like, ugh, I don't know how this is going to turn out, which is why episode 5 is going to be big time. Way big time. I don't know, man. I just have this weird feeling that there's something off about Anakin. And I don't know what it is. I mean, obviously, he turned into Darth Vader and destroyed.
Right. That's kind of a big huge thing. It becomes a major villain.
Yeah, obviously. But yeah, I don't know, man. There's so many questions. Like, how does Anakin get into the World Between Worlds? Why does he pull Ahsoka out in that moment? There's so many questions to be answered. I just can't get on the train of just yet that this Anakin is like there to actually help Ahsoka. It seems to me like somebody is pulling some strings and trying to lead Ahsoka in a certain direction. And I don't know what that is yet. I don't know what purpose that would even, because it's not Morgan Elsbeth. Like she's the Night Sister. She's like got the Dathomir stuff. The Night Sisters and the Jedi, like Force users, don't really understand each other. So I don't think this has anything to do with Elsbeth or any of the Night Sister stuff. But beyond that, I don't even know what it could be. So I'm like, I don't know. So we'll see what happens. But just crazy ending to episode 4 that just blew my mind for sure. I blew most people's minds. I feel. Oh yeah. Just wild. Okay, you mentioned episode 5 though, so I do want to actually talk about this a little bit. Episode 5, by all indications, Disney is saying is a big episode because they have set up a mid-season fan celebration in 5 cities where you can watch episode 5 in theaters.
Yep.
And this has not happened ever,
No.
Like, this is not a thing. So this has got to be a big episode.
It's got to be huge.
Something big is happening. I don't know what it is. So Tuesday, September 12th, next Tuesday is when this is coming out. Something big is happening, guys. I don't know what it is.
Do you think this is the episode they bring Rey in?
Oh my gosh. I feel like anything is possible with the world between worlds. So
right, like
sure.
That would be a wild way to connect it. Like
that would be wild.
I mean,
and so many people hate the sequels so much that I feel like that would make a lot of people mad if they, but like it's Disney, right? And Filoni didn't direct, obviously, any of the prequel trilogy, but I have to believe that he was a big part of vision and planning in those sequels as well. So I think that he's definitely going to connect them somehow. It'll be really interesting to see how that happens and how the fan base responds. Because I think generally The Mandalorian is pretty well loved. Some of these shows have been hit and miss. Obi-Wan Kenobi, I think most people liked. Ahsoka, so far, seems like everybody's been pretty much liking. The sequel trilogy is you either like it or you hate it with a burning passion. I don't know how the fan base is going to respond to all of this being connected. So it'll be very interesting. And we've discussed so many episodes that the Star Wars fandom is toxic, to say the least.
But with all that said, if there's anyone who can connect this in a good way, it's Filoni.
Yeah, it's
like
Filoni.
I trust Filoni to do this.
Yeah, in Filoni we trust. The way that he's transferred animation to live action so far, man, he's doing a phenomenal job. And the fact that he was just an animation guy, I know I actually saw something recently that I think it was Rian Johnson actually had him shadow a bunch on The Last Jedi so he could learn what being like a live action filmmaker was like, because he was just an animation guy before this.
Right.
Like, he had no idea how all that stuff works. And the fact that he's started at basically level 1 or 0 or whatever to this, where he's directing episodes of live action, television, is just, wow, this dude can do it all. And in Filoni we trust. Like, Here we go.
Straight up. Yep.
Keep it going. This episode's a 6 out of 6 for sure.
Easily.
I know you're on the same boat.
Easy.
Don't really, this has got to be, I'm trying to think of better episodes in live action. There's probably definitely a few Mandalorian episodes that we could say are in that capacity, like on this, in the same tier. I don't think any of them can probably level up to this in terms of just straight up references to, other Star Wars material. Like, oh, this is just phenomenal. So very excited to see what happens next. Any other comments or anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about, Zane?
I don't think so. I feel like we hit pretty much everything.
Long episode because we had
yeah, we did.
Of good stuff though. So happy Tano Tuesday next week for episode 5 of Ahsoka. Big things on the horizon for Star Wars. Let us know what you guys thought of episode 3 and 4 of Ahsoka. You can hit us up on any of our social media or email us at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com. Thanks, Zane, for hanging out with me today. It's been a blast.
It's a good time. It's always fun when it's a Zane and Isaac mess around,
Zane and Isaac mess arounds are always a good time for sure. So
always a blast.
Thank you, listeners, for making us a part of your podcast experience. Wherever you're listening, however you're listening, thank you so much. We love you 3000. Have an amazing day, night, weekend, whatever it is for you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Infinity Bros podcast. You can find the Infinity Bros on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube at The Infinity Bros. You can also check out our website at theinfinitybros.com for links, reviews, and sweet merch. Feel free to send us listener feedback via social media or email at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com.